So, do you need to know coding to get into cybersecurity? And the short answer is it depends. I know that's not the answer that everyone's after, but bear with me, I'll try and explain. So, when most people think of cybersecurity, they think of red teaming, they think of hacking, pen testing. So, the people who are actually pretending to be hackers and abusing systems and networks in order to try and find the vulnerabilities before the attackers do. That is a really, really small subset of cybersecurity. And I mean that quite literally, it is a very small subset. And if you ask companies, like, what's a necessity, like what should they really have as part of their security team, having in-house red teamers and pen testers is way at the bottom of the list. You don't need a pen test that regularly. You don't need a red team test that regularly. So, you would hire in a company. You would get in contractors to go do the test and then hand them off to your cybersecurity team. So it's a really small subset. Now, do you need to know coding to be a red team or a pen tester? It depends on the company you're going into and the type of testing they're doing, but it certainly helps. And that is true across the board for most cybersecurity areas, is that it helps. There are some where it is a necessity. So application security, for one. You're going to be reading and reviewing code. You need to know code before you go into it. So, it'd be handy if you actually had some developer background before you came into it. But that's not to say that you can't go into it from a graduate role and get trained up, but you definitely need that coding knowledge before you start doing things like application security. Now, on the other side, so you talked about red teamers, pen testers, AppSec. In the blue team, the team that I'm part of, the defensive side, it helps, but it is by no means a necessity. So for a bit of context, then life of a monitoring, so the people who actually watch for attacks that are happening and look for those signs and try and find these things before they become a bigger issue. For them, you don't really need to know coding because you're going to be looking at network logs. You're going to be looking at emails, like phishing emails that people have sent in to say, hey, I think this is dodgy. So you don't need it to do the job, but you're going to be doing a lot of repetitive stuff if you're monitoring, particularly if you're in a small company, which a lot of cybersecurity teams are quite small because companies don't really want to throw a whole lot of money at it. So knowing how to code or do some like basic scripting, like with Python or PowerShell, is incredibly helpful, and it will help to save you time. But you don't need to know it going in, and it's you're not going to be doing anything massively complicated, so you could pick it up on the job, and that's what a lot of people do. You've then got incident responders, so they're the ones who actually respond to incidents. Again, some companies, they have very small security teams. All of these roles that I'm going to talk about could all be bundled into one, and that is not uncommon. So just be aware, and yeah, I wouldn't recommend starting in a job like that because it's cool, you get to do a bit of everything, but you also have to do everything. So the responders would be the ones who actually respond to an incident. So a monitoring team would probably take a issue so far. If they found something that they think is maybe malicious, they would take it up to a certain point, and then they would hand it off to the responders to say, no, this needs further investigation. This needs to be actually dealt with. Responders are going to be talking to people a lot, as well as doing the sexy stuff like malware analysis. So like stripping apart malware, seeing how it works, doing forensics analysis and things like that. That will not happen often because major breaches, you would hope don't happen that often. So a lot of stuff that they would be doing is actually talking to users and advising them whenever they're doing something stupid, basically. Knowing coding for that? No. Again, similar to the monitoring, it is helpful to get rid of repetitive tasks. There's going to be stuff that you're going to be doing quite frequently. It is nice to have that knowledge to try and automate that as much as possible. You then got likes of teams who would do intelligence, so they would look for new vulnerabilities that are released and things like that to try and get ahead of them and get patched before they become an issue. Again, you don't need to know code. It can be more useful here though, because some of the intelligence that you might get might be POCs, proof of concepts for exploits. So Log4Shell, for example, which was one last Christmas, you can actually see the code of that exploit, and being able to read that is helpful so that you can sort of understand how it works. And in some cases, you can actually then look at a proof of concept code, and you can look at it and go, this does nothing. Or you can then take it and test it. Maybe give it to your AppSec team. Maybe you are the AppSec team as well. You do a bit of everything. So it is helpful in that case to be able to sort of read through. Again, doesn't happen all the time. It is something you could learn on the job. And then you've got the likes of network security architecture, security engineering, identity and access management, governance, and compliance. There's so many that I won't go into. And across the board, I can guarantee you all of them are, it's nice to have a bit of programming experience, but it is not a necessity. So if you're applying for a cybersecurity job and they are saying, oh yes, you must have Python experience, or you must have Rust, was one I seen recently. They really wanted people to code in Rust. They needed people who code in Rust. Now, whenever I spoke to the recruiter and asked, why do they need people to code in Rust? Do they have anything written in Rust, or what's the end game here? And they said, no, they heard that it was a new language coming out, so they wanted people experienced with it. Like, what are you meant to do about that? It's bollocks. So they did not need someone who could code in Rust. So this is something actually that comes across a lot in a lot of women in tech meetups and stuff. Is that typically, and again, this is a generalization, a woman is more likely to read a job spec and see something that they don't know and go, oh, I can't apply for that job because I don't know this aspect, but yet I hit on all the other ones. Whereas a man is more likely to look at it and go, oh yeah, I get most of these, so I'm going to go ahead and apply. And that is definitely the mentality to have. Now, 100%, the recruiters and the companies should fix their fucking job specs, but that problem's not going to go away anytime soon. So if you're reading through a job spec and it's saying stuff like, they're looking for someone who can do monitoring, cybersecurity monitoring or engineering, and they're saying, oh, you must know Python, or you must know C++, or you must know something. If there's something that doesn't look right, apply for it. And if they start asking you questions about it, go, why do I need to know this? Or what's the goal here? Because it could be they're looking something completely different, and then do you actually want that job necessarily? For entry level jobs, sometimes it's you take what you can get, which is fair, but don't be afraid to apply for roles that you don't maybe meet all those criteria. And don't believe all the people who spout bullshit saying that you need to have coding experience, because you don't. Those people just don't understand the sheer scope of cybersecurity and how many jobs there really is.